In this webinar, we're going to focus on southern and central United States, and these include the states of Georgia, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and the Deep South, which covers Alabama, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Tennessee. We have a great panel with us today. We're joined by Della Tully, who's the Senior Trade Account Director for Explore Georgia. We have Matt Bates, who is the Destination Awareness Manager for Oklahoma Tourism and the Recreation Department. We have Peter Hannaford, who is the Sales Manager for UK and Ireland for Arkansas. And representing the Deep South are Viara Chalier and Andy Facer, who are both account directors for that. Welcome to you all. Della, I'm going to start with you, if I may. Imagine, and I sincerely hope that this comes to pass very, very shortly, I'm going to be in Georgia for a few days. So what are my absolute must-see and do's?
Well, there's kind of a lot of different directions you can take, really. Obviously, Atlanta is a huge hub, as we know. And we like to say we're kind of like the capital, the unofficial capital in Georgia of the Southeast. From Atlanta, you can really kind of go in a lot of different directions. So if you head north, you're in the North Georgia mountains, the start of the Appalachian Trail. I mean, literally within 90 minutes if you head north out of Atlanta. So this area is obviously also very popular for people domestically that want to get out of the city and into those, into the fresh mountain air of the mountains. So that Appalachian Trail starts in Georgia. Not many people know that, but obviously that's the oldest mountain range in the US, goes all the way up through New England. So a couple of thousand miles, it starts in Georgia. So, we have a lot of state parks, which have all those kind of recreational opportunities, getting out on kayaks, hiking, biking, horseback riding. I think maybe you'll think it has to be a national park to be able to offer those things, but not so. In Georgia, you have a lot of opportunities to get outdoors and get in those wide open spaces, which of course is even more popular now. If you head kind of southeast from Atlanta, you're on the coast. Savannah is only just over 4 hours from Atlanta, so a half day's drive actually brings you to the coast. And Savannah really is a jewel in the crown. I have to say that it's kind of one of my personal favorites. It's just such a vibrant hub. It sits on the river. It has a lot of history, Spanish and British history. Savannah was the last colonial city to be built, so you've got 22 squares with parks in the middle. It's where Forrest Gump said life is like a box of chocolates. Incredibly picturesque, horse and buggy rides, all that kind of thing. Popular destination domestically as well for honeymoons, because it really is just that quintessential southern city. And then just south of that you have the coast. We have over 100 miles of coastline. People don't always associate coastline with the Deep South in general, but we have amazing beaches, for example, like Driftwood Beach on Jekyll Island. Jekyll Island is a state park. It's one of the largest and most well-known of the Golden Isles, as they're called. So, and then heading down south of that, you find yourself in Florida. So we have a bit of everything, really. Small towns, mountains, coastline, music history, of course, goes without saying with the South. It's just music history everywhere. And obviously, it's not just history, it's alive and kicking, obviously, now as well.
Matt Bates, Oklahoma. Seems to me that it has uniquely American attractions. So can you tell us a bit more about what we might expect with a visit to Oklahoma?
Sure. And we're right in the center of the country, halfway along the old settler trails for those heading out west in the 1800s, and in the middle of the tall grass prairie, which was huge in North American continent, not so much nowadays, but we have a large stretch of it, and that attracted buffalo in their millions at that time, and for that reason attracted Native American tribes too to come down into the area seasonally, because they followed the buffalo for their lives, basically. It's the heartland situation that we're in that probably hallmarks our attractions, and it's that restlessness that pervaded the whole central area of the states that probably inspired Cyrus Avery, who's a Tulsa, Oklahoma businessman in the 1920s, to think of Route 66, think of a commercial route originally intended to go straight across the country. So Route 66 is again centered in Oklahoma, and then obviously extends both directions, east and west. But we have 500 drivable miles of that, and it's really important to us from a history and tourism point of view. So our story really is cowboy and Western life and culture. Both are still very much alive. Route 66, obviously, but newer stories that we're working hard to develop and that are beginning to get some traction for us is our music pedigree, live music. We have a lot of country and Western and country artists who have come out of Oklahoma and are beginning to perform more there and build up their careers and businesses there. And we have a growing farm to fork food story to tell as well, centered around the two main cities, Tulsa and Oklahoma City. So we're really about the growth of what is now known as the United States, and the various peoples who came to build the USA. And we're changing all the time because the US is still changing all the time. But we're working hard at getting the message over. We have an old oil independent oil story to tell as well, which is actually funding a lot of the tourism development going on in the state, particularly in Tulsa, and some new attractions coming up, which we'll probably get a chance to mention later on. So yeah, exciting times.
Peter Hannaford, bordering the eastern border of Oklahoma, you have the state of Arkansas, which I will confess, other than it being the birthplace of one Mr. Bill Clinton, if you had to ask me, tell me about Arkansas, I'd be like, oh, I'm not really sure. So that's why you're here.
Exactly. You know what? And I like to think of Arkansas being in that because of that being rather exotic. You know, people that, they don't know much about it, and it's exotic that way. But you're right. Most people know Arkansas because of Bill Clinton, but it's very, very much a southern state, but it has hints, as Matt's kind of as you alluded to as well, of the West as well. So it's all about the music and the cuisine and the history in terms of the South, but on that kind of western border, it's very much frontier country as it was, going back into the late 19th century. So. And the South is all about road trips, and I think what Arkansas does now actually is it bridges that kind of those western states, because you can fly into Dallas and you can come through Arkansas into the deep South, into Memphis and Nashville and Alabama and the likes. So it almost is like a piece of a jigsaw that's been missing, and it kind of joins those. So in terms of some highlights. Well, kind of easy win is a little colony. It's not even called a town. It's called a colony called Dice, and it's 40 minutes from Memphis. And and it was originally founded as a place where dirt poor, destitute people were given land and given money in the 1930s during the Depression. One of those families was the Cash family. And this is Johnny Cash boyhood home. So you can, the South is a lot about music and the history of music. And if you're following Johnny Cash, it's definitely worth a 40-minute drive up into Dice to see the Johnny Cash boyhood home. There's nothing really much of Dice anymore. It's pretty much disappeared, but the boyhood home's still there. And it's a mecca. People come from all over the country to see his boyhood home. Heading a bit further north, you're into the Ozark Mountains, and the Ozarks have a lot of the similarities to the Appalachians, and you've got some great mountain towns. Eureka Springs is just a kind of haven that's a really buzzy, eclectic kind of place. You've got Bentonville, which bizarrely is the home of Walmart. Walmart was founded in Bentonville, and they have a Walmart museum. bizarrely. And Walmart's really not that far from Tulsa. I think it's in about 2 or 3 hours. So you can kind of fit these things together nicely. And, you've got the capital, Little Rock, which has got presidential library. And you've got Hot Springs down to the south, which is a thermal spring town. Has a beautiful Mediterranean-type boardwalk. The history is kind of gangster history. It's all the gangsters from Chicago came down during the 1930s and kind of let off steam. It was all about illegal gambling and the history around that as well. So lots of different things, but that's just the flavor of it.
And obviously Arkansas is part of the South, but when we talk about the Deep South, Andy Facer, I mean, we're talking about a multiple of states, and I imagine, though, it's easy to think, well, it's just one kind of distinct identity, when in fact, Louisiana is different from Tennessee, it's different from Alabama. So we're talking about a fairly broad region with a lot of different things going on.
Absolutely. And I think, like you say, we talk about 5 states and, people automatically think, oh, my God, this is going to be huge. It's going to be a massive area. But when you actually look at those 5 Deep South states, Alabama, Kentucky, Mississippi, Louisiana and Tennessee combined, they're actually smaller than Texas. So, you could literally pick those 5 states up in geographical area and pop them in Texas, and there'd still probably be a bit of space for Arkansas or Oklahoma or maybe a bit of Georgia as well. So, yeah, it's not, it's not the largest of areas, but it's one of those places. It's an ultimate fly drive destination. You've got fantastic Gulf Coast beaches in Alabama and in Mississippi. Obviously, we've got the Great Smoky Mountains, which we've already touched on, the mighty Mississippi, and the world's largest known cave system. So they're just a couple of the things that you can, touch on in our area. Obviously, we've got we've got our large international airports in New Orleans, Nashville, and Atlanta, so it makes us extremely accessible. And obviously, we've got all of our local and regional airports as well. And like you say, we're talking here about the Deep South, but each of these 5 states does have its own individual personality. But I think what the great thing is, we all share the same passion for our music and our culture, our history, outdoor experiences and world-class attractions. I mean, where else can you experience the Kentucky Derby, Dollywood, the world's largest space museum, Elvis's birthplace, and Mardi Gras all on the same trip?
Della, Andy's talking about popular fly drive destinations. Atlanta is obviously a major transportation hub with direct flights from Dublin direct into Atlanta. And so whilst you can then use Atlanta as the hub from which to ribbon out and explore, Atlanta itself is absolutely worthy of consideration, is it not?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. We're in danger of people coming into Atlanta and then springboarding out, if you like, because we are central to so many other states. And, as Andy was just saying about the Deep South, Atlanta is often also used as a gateway for that, as a fly drive kind of circle. But Atlanta, yes, I mean, has really kind of blossomed, I think, in recent years. The Beltline, which is like a 22-mile, mostly old railway track, has been sort of converted into a walkway, bikeway, just as a way of people getting out of their cars in Atlanta and exploring the neighborhoods without actually just driving past them. So also to mention, in Atlanta, we are a massive movie producer in Georgia. We're one of the top destinations in the world for feature films. Not many people know that, but now when you look at films, you might see the little Georgia peach in the credits. So you can do movie tours in Atlanta of so many different movie locations. A lot of the newer Marvel films filmed in Atlanta. Also, obviously, we have like Gone with the Wind history, of course, but Walking Dead, those cult series, Walking Dead, Vampire Diaries, you can do tours around the city of those film locations. The History Center in Atlanta as well is where the Swan House is from the Hunger Games. So a huge amount of filming goes on in Atlanta and Georgia as a state, really. We've got a Porsche driving experience out near the airport. They've yet to let me do this, Fionn, which is they've obviously heard how I drive and I couldn't be trusted. But yeah, there's so much to do. We're very much a foodie city. If you go around the Beltline, you'll see a place called Ponce City Market, which is the old Sears factory building, which has been converted into this amazing retail and dining establishment, great rooftop views. And certainly one of the things you must do in Atlanta is the new Illuminarium, which is actually just opened, which is like a virtual safari experience, a walkthrough experience. But also don't forget the civil rights history in Atlanta.
Sure.
You know, we have the Center for Civil and Human Rights, which tells the story of not just Martin Luther King, but obviously the whole US civil rights story. It's absolutely excellent. You can also go to the Civil Rights District, where you have Martin Luther King's church, his boyhood home, and his gravesite. Just an amazing amount of history in Atlanta, as well as things obviously like the Georgia Aquarium, and you know, lots of other attractions that you can go to. The World of Coca-Cola, another one there, really. And many of them located in one area, the Center for Civil and Human Rights, the World of Coca-Cola, and the Georgia Aquarium. The top 3 attractions are in the Olympic Park area, the downtown area. So it's all pretty much walkable.
And Matt, you mentioned it earlier on, but when we talk about fly drive and cinematic experiences, really Route 66 is high in the imagination of most visitors to the United States. But if I am to do, say, a fly drive in your state, what are the things I'm going to see along the way?
Okay, well, most of our Route 66 visitors would come in east to west, so they would encounter fairly quickly about 75 miles in Tulsa, which is the home of the route, and the other 2 anchor cities on the route on our 500 miles are then Oklahoma City, and then Elk City out to the west towards the end of our section of it. We look after it very carefully. We're in the midst of a big signposting operation at the moment in the state, and we have something like 100 officially recognized and registered attractions of all kinds along our section of the route. That would be from refurbished motels from the 50s, 60s, 70s, diners. You might even find a couple of dives if you looked closely enough, and if you're a fan of the program. And a lot of the Route 66 attractions are actually in those 3 city locations. We have 3 fabulous museums, all very different. One organized by the state, one national, and then actually a private one on the eastern end at Clinton, which is a sort of hands-on facility that's great for kids traveling with in families. So everything that Oklahoma City and Tulsa have to offer is also there for Route 66 visitors. And I think probably the main bit of advice I would give people is, if you think that you're going to need a couple of days to get through and see what you need to see, really think again and take some good advice, because 4 days at a minimum, and anything up from that. And in fact, we're currently having some success in getting our tour operator partners to talk to clients who've been planning a long time through this lockdown to take the trip over 2 years or 2 trips and do one half of the route and then go back to it if the first half meets their expectations. And we're getting a bit of traction with that. I think people who have had not able to spend money but able to spend a lot of time planning in this last year, 15 months, have really got into improving their dream holiday plans as far as their time and money will allow them to. And Route 66 is a perfect candidate for that.
Viara, my next one. When we talk, and this really applies across all of the South and in all of the states that we're covering today, but we talk about Southern hospitality, we talk about Southern charm, we talk about this tradition of hospitality. But, you know, at the risk of it being kind of turned into a cliche, can you give us What exactly is it? And more to the point, if we go to visit, how will we recognize it as different, say, from the kind of charming hospitality that you would meet in the West or in the Northeast or other parts of what is largely a very friendly country?
It's a very, very good question, because yes, the southern states, all of us here, are very, very different from what you experience in the rest of the United States. And it is all about the people and all about how they welcome visitors to this region. And you're always welcome with a smile. There is always a big welcome, no matter where you are, no matter if you're in a quintessentially deep southern small city like Mobile or Tupelo or Oxford or somewhere in Kentucky like Bardstown. You'll always be welcome. And you always be welcome with the same warmth that you will be in the big city like Nashville or Memphis or Birmingham or New Orleans. But I also want to like to think that what we always bring as part of this hospitality is that so warm food, because the states are all about feeding your soul. We call that soul food for a very good reason. And it doesn't matter if it's the barbecue or the jambalaya or the fried chicken. We are there to feed your soul. And also, of course, in the sounds of the music. I mean, you will find the music, as everybody said, everywhere and anywhere in the South. And it will be full of festivals and friendly experiences. And this is it. Everybody is welcome. That's what the region is all about.
Peter, it just dawned on me that if you were an Irish visitor looking to travel to Arkansas, what's the most obvious port of entry into the state?
I think we kind of touched on Dallas, probably.
You reckon Dallas?
Well, it depends which way you would, because it absolutely, and I think we're there. This is all about road trips, so it depends which direction you start. So you can start in Dallas. Dallas is just about an hour from the border of Arkansas, Texarkana, and it's a couple of hours up to Little Rock, and then you're on two hours more. You're in Memphis, but of course from there you can go on to Nashville. So there's no reason why you couldn't do it the other way around as well, and come kind of into Nashville, even start in Atlanta and in Dallas as well. But I mean, Dallas is a major American hub. So, and I think there was at one point, not last year, year before, American were operating or about to operate Dallas to Dublin. So, fingers crossed that's coming back. But that and then you can do all sorts of things. You can even go into Chicago out of Dallas, or is with Dallas in the mix, it kind of opens up all sorts of opportunities, I think.
I want to talk about Native American culture, Matt. And as far as I know, Oklahoma has some pretty rich tradition when it comes to Native American history.
Yeah, and that's largely because the tribes, a lot of the tribes who were originally in what would now be Canada, and down in the southeastern seaboard and Florida of what's obviously now the U.S., moved or were pushed by circumstances and emerging governments into the center of the nation. And we now have 39 tribes of all sizes and origins headquartered in Oklahoma, and some of them are very wealthy. Others are well off. They're all in pretty good shape in terms of their own population size and their ability to do business and to compete in the state with all other of the populations. And they tell their story because they have money and time and determination. They tell their story very effectively. And in fact, in October of this year, we hope to have FAM opening, which is the first Americans Museum developed by the 39 tribes led by the Chickasaw, which is the largest tribe. That's right on the edge of downtown in Oklahoma. It's a massive complex with a large powwow ground. And it is going to be a real game changer in the Oklahoma City area. But all over the state, Cherokee, Choctaw, Osage, they have all, Comanche, they have all developed their own cultural centers, living history villages. They tell their story very effectively, it's a real focus for visitors.
Now, Della alluded to it, certainly in relation to Georgia, but Andy, when we talk about the Deep South, and it's been mentioned by all of you, is music, jazz, blues, country, the roots of 20th century music, not just American music, but world music, really originates in this corner of the United States. But at the risk of being overwhelmed, if you had to give me kind of like a really, really fast primer on where I need to go to get to the roots of it, what should I do?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, our musical history is rich and varied. We've got fantastic musical studios. So Muscle Shoals Sound up in Alabama, where Aretha Franklin at the Fame Studios cut her first hit record. This sort of area forms what we call the Golden Triangle. So obviously from there, you can go to Sun Studio in Memphis, where Elvis cut his first track, and then at Studio B in Nashville. So you've got these three fantastic recording studios, like you say, where all this iconic music came out of. But the roots of the music run deep in the Deep South. Obviously, the birthplace of jazz is New Orleans, the Delta blues in Mississippi, bluegrass in Kentucky, and then obviously the country music, which everyone's grown to love in Tennessee. So, some of America's greatest music legends were born in this region. They recorded in this region, and international stars, have come to record their hits as well. So, like I say, it's just a massive melting pot of all these different styles. And great places where all of these recording studios that I've mentioned, you can go to their working studios, you can visit them, and if you're really lucky, you get the opportunity to cut a record there as well.
Wow!
Obviously, my dulcet tones have not graced the decks as yet, but it's something we're saving for a significant occasion. So yeah.
But Andy, I suppose, that's all amazing stuff, and the history of it is incredibly important. And as a fan of the Nashville TV series, I know that you can do this. But to hear it live, like I know that in New Orleans, you can go into the French Quarter and the various neighborhoods, and you can hear live jazz. I presume the same is true if you wanted to go hear live country music, live blues, live bluegrass, and so on.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. If you, like you say, you've mentioned the jazz music that you get in the French Quarter. We often say for a more authentic experience, if you just go a little bit further out somewhere like Frenchman Street, which is where most of the locals go, and that'll give you a really, really authentic experience of that particular music. If you work your way up the Mississippi, the river, obviously you can go to Morgan Freeman's bar, Ground Zero, where you've got, again, fantastic live music acts every night. So a couple of 100 miles up the road, completely different style of music, completely different feeling, etc. A bit further up from there, you're at Elvis's birthplace in Tupelo. And like you said, obviously in Nashville, you've got the country music, etc. there. So you can go to the Grand Ole Opry, which is America's longest running radio station. Go there on a Saturday night at the Ryman, and who knows? You might turn up, you might get lucky, you might see Dolly banging out a couple of big hits on the stage there. So you've got all these great opportunities. You go to Kentucky, and this, like I say, the whole bluegrass, which is obviously a slightly different style of country, I guess. VR is probably going to tell me off for that. Nothing to do with country.
It's the case.
It's very much its own thing. But again, you can go and listen to a completely different style. And then, obviously I mentioned the recording studios in Muscle Shoals. You've got a place there called the Rattlesnake Saloon, which is a bar in a cave, essentially. So you can sit there and get some authentic cave water dripping on your head while listening to a local rock band sort of banging out some hits, and having some great barbecue as well while you're there. So real variety. I guess one of the places we were really sad to lose last year, there was a place called Gibbs Place, which is in the outskirts of Birmingham, and as far as we were concerned, it was the world's last remaining juke joint. And Henry Gibson passed away sadly at 99 years 2 years ago. And it was a ramshackle place. You'd turn up there, you took your own beer, there'd be some person in the corner cooking something over the coals or whatever. You weren't sure what it was, but once you'd had a couple of beers, you didn't really care. But fantastic experience, and the sort of thing you would never get in this country. Health and safety would never pass it off. But
Can I add as well, the French kind of quarters experience is very much available in Nashville on Broadway, because you have live bars lining both streets, live music in every single one of them, up and down, different styles. And then you have, of course, Beale Street in Memphis, which is very, very similar. So, live music all over the Deep South in every city.
Fionn, let me just add two very brief items, if I may.
Go on, Matt.
That say something about our music story too, alongside all these greats that have been mentioned. Coming up at the end of this year, beginning of next year, we have the opening of the Bob Dylan Archive, Bob Dylan Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma. His archive and continuing archive have been bought by a family there, and they're currently building a building to put that in. So that's going to be a real experiential background to Dylan's previous work and his current work. And also opening later this year is the refurbished Leon Russell's Church Studio in Tulsa, which hosted the Rolling Stones and Clapton and various other artists of the 70s. It's been recommissioned as a digital and analog studio, working studio, but it will also have a visitor center and facility as well. And it's going to be going to take its place on the music stage from turn of year this year. So couple of additions to this.
All I can say is that I hope that rather than just talk about these places, that we soon will be able to go and experience these places for ourselves. So I want to thank my panel today, Della Tully, who is the Senior Trade Account Director for Explore Georgia, to Matt Bates, Destination Awareness Manager for Oklahoma Tourism and Recreation Department, to Peter Hannaford, who is the Sales Manager for the UK and Ireland for Arkansas, and representing the Deep South were Viara Chalier and Andy Facer. Thank you all very much.